One of the things that happens when the Israelites leave the tyranny, now they're in the desert, right? And they're there for 3 generations, by the way.
Oh, God,
right,
dude.
right.
I hate that. My mother lives in Tucson, and that's hard enough sometimes to go over that, to get out there.
Yeah. This is a terrifying rule. If you don't provide yourself with direction, you will take direction from a tyrant.
Yeah.
Right. So, and you might say, well, why should I take responsibility? You asked that, it's like, I'm afraid of my own goals because of the responsibility. It's like, well, you're either going to be responsible to yourself or you're going to be responsible to a tyrant. That's your option set.
Yeah.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah, bet. Pick one: tyranny, slavery, or something approximating visionary self-determination.
So many of us are aimless.
Yeah.
It's like we're like, why do I feel aimless? People ask me that all the time. Like, man, I feel so aimless.
Yeah,
I don't know what to do.
Well,
you know?
Okay, so 2 things happen when you're aimless. Okay, so the first is you get anxious. And the reason you get anxious is because anxiety computes aimlessness. So if you drop someone in the middle of a desert, the reason they're anxious is because it's not because they don't know which way to go. It's because there are way too many places to go, right? Every direction. And that's aimlessness, is like every direction beckons. Your brain is set up to produce positive emotion, literally. This is what the positive emotion system does. It computes decrease between you and a goal. So if you have a goal and you see that you've done something that moves you towards it, your brain produces a dopamine hit, and that makes you feel good, and it strengthens the neural circuits that moved you forward. It does both of those. That's reward and reinforcement. And what that means is, if you don't have a goal, you have no positive emotion. It's not political, man. It's motivational.
Yeah.
Nietzsche said, he who has a why can bear any how. And so partly what you do in your life is you look for a why that justifies the catastrophe, right? It's like,
well, yeah, we've talked about that before. Because I remember telling you I'm afraid to set my goals because I don't want to have to hold myself responsible.
Yeah.
And you're
right,
like,
of course.
You're like, well, you have to set your goals, and also you need to look at what your life would be like if the worst things happen to you.
Exactly.
So then you have like something to stay away from. You have like this is not where I want to be. You know, and it gives your brain those parameters, and then your brain can start to operate better than if you were just kind of being aimless.
Now, not only do I have to be re-educated by this social media expert, but I have to do it at my own expense for an indefinite period of time.
Wow.
Until I've learned whatever the hell lesson I'm supposed to learn, and I don't exactly know what lesson that is, by their judgment, right? And so
it's all up to them. So it's kind of this vague thing
them.
that they've put you into, and they challenged you because they were upset at things you had said on Twitter.
Mostly on Twitter. No, well,
okay.
They also, somebody submitted the entire transcript of my last conversation with Joe Rogan as a complaint, partly because of what I said about climate change. Tolerance beyond a certain level is 100% absolutely, incontrovertibly a vice. And when tolerance has got to the point where it's a vice, then it's time to not be so nice.
When you say a vice, what do you mean?
Well, a vice is a pattern of behavior that, if indulged in, especially repeatedly, leads to nothing but negative consequences, even by the self-definition of the person engaging in the vice. Excess alcohol use tends to be a vice.
Yeah.
Well, why? Okay, how do you diagnose alcoholism as a pathology? Well, the first thing you do is you look at amount and frequency, let's say, but that's not enough. It has to be a high amount, frequently, that causes substantial disruption to one or more important domains of life. Is it compromising your health? Are your friends starting to object? Have you got in trouble with the law?
Is your wife mad?
Right, exactly. So is the behavior starting to produce negative consequences, even by your definition, or perhaps even more importantly by your definition? You know, I already got a phone call. I got a phone call about 3 weeks ago from Ben Shapiro, but it wasn't Ben Shapiro. No. It was someone using an AI system to modify their voice in real time using Ben Shapiro's accent and diction. And after talking to him for about a minute, I knew something was up, because the way he talked wasn't the way Ben talked, but the voice was, the cadence, everything, 100% perfect. And of course, we've already seen deep fake videos, and they're going to become extremely common. And you can imagine, how could this not be the case? You know, on the eve before a critical election, there'll be the release of some deep fake video. Of course, absolutely. You know, of a candidate in bed with someone, or God only knows doing what or saying what. And by the time we find out that it's a fake, it'll have had the effect on the election.
Yeah.
And so what are we going to do when photographs and videos can be faked with perfect fidelity, and people generally don't know this, is that it was the Protestant fervor for distribution of the Bible that made the world literate, not just Europe. Because the Protestants then went everywhere. They have literally done this with virtually every spoken language. In fact, I think they'll be done by 2050. The Bible will be translated into every language. And what the Protestant missionaries did is, if they came across a people who had a language with no alphabet, they worked with them to develop an alphabet so that they could print the Bible and distribute it. And literacy was literally brought to the world by the combination of the printing press and the Protestant evangelists.
So a lot of cultures and a lot of like just people a long time ago, the first book they ever learned to read was the Bible.
Well, for the longest period of time, it was the only book.
Wow.
For forever. See, human beings are strange creatures because we evolved the ability to produce virtual representations of ourselves. That's what a thought is. Thought is a virtual extension of you. Okay, so what human beings do is they produce thoughts that multiply, and all the ones that aren't useful die. Well, then the people don't have to die. And so we've substituted the death of thought for the death of people. And what that also means is that because we can transmute our thought and change it abstractly, we can change the manner in which we act radically enough so we're not subject to Malthusian limitations. We can get more from less all the time.
So many of us are aimless.
Yeah.
It's like we're like, why do I feel aimless? People ask me that all the time. Like, man, I feel so aimless.
Yeah,
I don't know what to do.
Well,
you know?
Okay, so two things happen when you're aimless. Okay, so the first is you get anxious. And the reason you get anxious is because anxiety computes aimlessness. So if you drop someone in the middle of a desert, the reason they're anxious is because it's not because they don't know which way to go. It's because there are way too many places to go, right? Every direction. And that's aimlessness, is like every direction beckons. Your brain is set up to produce positive emotion. Literally, this is what the positive emotion system does. It computes decrease between you and a goal. So if you have a goal and you see that you've done something that moves you towards it, your brain produces a dopamine hit, and that makes you feel good, and it strengthens the neural circuits that moved you forward. It does both of those. That's reward and reinforcement. And what that means is, if you don't have a goal, you have no positive emotion.